Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about 21st century business language. We have discussed the importance of getting your punctuation and apostrophes in the right place and understanding how to put a sentence together. However, it's not going to make you an effective writer if you write like our great grandfathers used to write. It might still get the job done eventually, but using old fashioned language will not help you stand out from the rest, and it will not help you to build relationship. In the middle of the 20th century, business was conducted in a much more impassive, formal way than it is today. Face-to-face meetings were very formal and aloof. Similarly, the writing that evolved then became very formal, using long-winded, quite overbearing language. Writers used big words because they thought they would impress their readers, and many redundant expressions to add padding to their sentences. Passive voice was used extensively, putting a distance between the writer and the reader, which is exactly what people intended in those days. Business today, however, is conducted in a very informal way. In meetings and conferences, we use a natural, more relaxed, friendly language rather than a natural, formal language that was used several decades ago. We use active voice to get to the point quicker, but we still take care of to be tactful. The end in business in general is to develop relationships first. And this is done through connecting well and using appropriate language. According to the author of our text, she says, "It really surprises me to find that despite this, so many people are using a completely different style for their writing and are using language in their writing that they would never use in speaking. Language that is more suited to our great grandfathers rather than to 21st century businessmen and women." The language used in our writing today should be simple, courteous, relaxed, and straightforward, quite conversational. Here are some of the key reasons why you need to relax your language in all your written communications. Number one, to establish relationships. Number two, to communicate your ideas precisely. Number three, to convey a good impression. Seven things to avoid in 21st century business writing. Number one, redundant expressions. Number two, long-winded words and phrases. Number three, passive voice. Number four, yesterday's language. Number five, writing differently to how we speak. Number six, using commas instead of full stops. Number 7, using thank you and regards all the time. Number 1, redundant expression. Instead of saying, please be advised that our next meeting will be held on Monday, June 14, we should say, our next meeting will be held on Monday, June 14. Instead of saying, kindly be informed that the fire alarm will be tested at 9 a.m. tomorrow, we should say, the fire alarm will be tested at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Instead of saying, I'm writing to let you know that Mr. John Ling is no longer with our company, we should say, Mr. John Ling is no longer with our company. Number 2, long-winded words and phrases. Instead of using, I should be very grateful, we should use please. Instead of using purchase, we should use buy. Instead of using endeavor, we should use try. Instead of using commands, we should use start. Instead of using terminate, we should use end. Number 3, passive voice. Instead of saying, arrangements have been made for a repeat order to be dispatched to you immediately, we should say, I have arranged for a repeat order to be sent to you today. Instead of saying, the cause of your complaint has been investigated, we should say, I have looked into this matter. Instead of saying, the seminar will be conducted by Adrian Chen, we should say, Adrian Chen will conduct the seminar. Instead of saying, sales of the X101 have exceeded all expectations, we should say, X101 sales have gone sky high. Number 4, yesterday's language. Instead of saying, we refer to your letter of October 21st, 2011, we should say, thank you for your letter dated October 21st, 2011. Instead of saying, the above-mentioned goods will be dispatched to you today, we should say, these goods will be sent to you today. Instead of saying, please see the below-mentioned list of items we have in stock, we should say, these are the items we have in stock. Instead of saying, kindly furnish us with this information soon, we should say, please let us have this information soon. Number 5, writing differently to how we speak. Instead of saying, your email of this morning refers, we should say, thanks for your email. Instead of saying, as spoken this morning, we should say, thank you for your call this morning. Instead of saying, as per our telecom, we should say, it was good to speak to you today. Instead of saying, I kindly requested your approval, we should say, I hope to receive your approval. Instead of saying, appreciate if you could help to process this claim at your earliest, we should say, please process this claim soon. Number 6, using commas instead of full stops. Instead of saying, thanks for your email, it was good to hear from you, we should say, thanks for your email, it was good to hear from you. Instead of saying, Mary is responsible for this convention, she will be in touch with you soon, we should say, Mary is responsible for this convention. She will be in touch with you soon. Instead of saying, sales have been good this year, the figures are higher than last year, we should say, sales have been very good this year. The figures are higher than last year. Instead of saying, I love your ideas for this project. However, I'd like to discuss some issue with you, we should say, I love your ideas for this project. However, I'd like to discuss some issues with you. Number 7, using thank you and regards at the end of the letter all the time. Instead of saying thank you, we should say, or we should try, saying thank you for your help. Please add a specific reason if you need other people's help. Or you should not use thank you. Instead of saying regards all the time, you should try to use best regards or warm regards, or see you soon, or have a great weekend. Ten steps to brilliant business writing. Number 1, writing naturally and sincerely. Number 2, be courteous and considerate. Number 3, use appropriate tone. Number 4, use simple words and short sentences. Number 5, use modern language. Number 6, use active, not passive voice. Number 7, avoid nominalizations, that is, using a noun instead of a verb. Number 8, use positive language. Number 9, use you and we. Number 10, be consistent. Number 1, writing naturally and sincerely. In our business letter, instead of saying, we had received your letter of June 12, we should say, thanks for your letter of June 12. Instead of saying, I have pleasure in informing you, we should say, I'm pleased to tell you. Instead of saying, we do not anticipate any increase in prices, we should say, we do not expect prices to rise. Instead of saying, I should be grateful if you would be good enough to advise us, we should say, please let me know. Instead of saying, please favor us with a prompt reply, we should say, I hope to receive a prompt reply. Number 2, be courteous and considerate. Reply promptly to all messages. Answer on the day if possible. If you cannot answer immediately, write a brief note and explain why. This will create goodwill. Understand and respect the recipient's point of view. Resist the temptation to reply as if your correspondent is wrong. If you feel some comments are unfair, be tactful and try not to cause offense. Resist the temptation to reply to an offensive letter in a similar tone. Instead, answer courteously and do not lower your dignity. Number 3, use appropriate tone. In our business letter, instead of saying, we cannot do anything about your problem, we should say, unfortunately, we are unable to help you on this occasion. Instead of saying, the problem would not have happened if you had connected the wires properly, we should say, the problem may be resolved by connecting the wires as shown in the handbook. Instead of saying, your television's guarantee is up, so you will have to pay for it to be fixed, you should say, your television's guarantee has ended, so unfortunately, you must bear the cost of any repairs. Instead of saying, I'm writing to complain because I was unhappy with the way I was treated in your store today, we should say, I was most unhappy with the standard of service I received in your store today. Number 4, use simple words and short sentence. Number 1, use short words. Instead of saying commands, we should say star. Instead of saying regarding, we should say about. Instead of saying purchase, we should say buy. Instead of saying utilize, we should say use. Instead of saying require, we should say need. Instead of using endeavor or attempt, we should use try. Instead of using terminate, we should use end. Instead of using state, we should say. Instead of using expedite, we should use hurry, speed up. Instead of using advise, inform, we should use tell. Number 4, use simple words and short sentences too. Use short words. In our business correspondence, instead of using visualize, we should use see. Instead of using dispatch, we should use send. Instead of using assist, we should use help. Instead of using sufficient, we should use enough. Instead of using kindly, we should use please. Number 4, use simple words and short sentences 3. Keep sentences short and simple. In our correspondence, instead of saying, I should be glad if you would, we should use please. Instead of using in spite of the fact that, we should use despite. Instead of using with regard to, we should use about. Instead of using at the present moment in time, we should use now. Instead of using conduct an investigation, we should use investigate. Instead of using in view of the fact that, we should use as, because. Instead of using in the event that, we should use if. Instead of using in the very near future, we should use soon. Instead of using at a later date, we should use later. Instead of using we would like to ask you to, we should use please. Number 5, use modern language. In our business letter, instead of using we are in receipt of your letter of June 12, we should use thank you for your letter of June 12. Instead of using we have received your letter of June 12, we should use thank you for your letter of June 12. Instead of using enclosed herewith, you will find, we should use attached is or I'm attaching. Instead of using please find attached, we should use I enclose. Instead of using the above mentioned goods, we should use please remember. Number 6. Use active, not passive voice. 1. In our business correspondence, instead of using "the violin was played by Tim," we should use "Tim played the violin." Instead of using "the new system was developed by our staff," we should use "our staff developed the new system." Instead of using "the check was presented to the charity by the Duchess of Cambridge," we should use "the Duchess of Cambridge presented the check to the charity." Instead of saying "your cooperation is needed in providing the following information for the directory," we should say, "Please let me have this information for the directory." Number 6. Use active, not passive voice. 2. Instead of saying, "These notes should be read carefully before completing the form," we should say, "Please read these notes carefully before completing the form." Instead of using "the investigation has been concluded by our client and the paperwork has been signed," we should say, "Our client has concluded the investigation and signed the paperwork." Number 7. Avoid nominalizations. That is, avoid using a noun to replace a verb. In our letter, we should use verb instead of noun. For example, we should use instead of "the use of." We should use avoid instead of "the avoidance of." We should use improve instead of "the improvement of." We should use implement instead of "the implementation of." We should use clarify instead of "the clarification of." We should use avoid instead of "the avoidance." We should use complete instead of "the completion of." We should use provide instead of "the provision of." We should use arrange instead of "the arrangement of." We should use fail instead of "the failure of." Number 8. Use positive language. In our business correspondence, we need to use positive words rather than negative words. We need to use benefit rather than impossible, congratulations rather than damaged, delighted rather than unable to, Generous rather than mistake. Glad instead of problem. Proven instead of loss. Sell instead of delay. Convenient rather than failure. Qualified rather than trouble. Excellent rather than cannot. Number 9, use you and we. In our business correspondence, instead of saying participants must bring with them, we should say, please bring with you. Instead of saying a device is available from, we should say you can get advice from. Instead of saying our company is currently restructuring, we should say we are restructuring. Instead of saying we always tell our clients when, we should say we will always tell you when. Number 10, be consistent. In our business correspondence, instead of using the people attending will be John Wilson, G. Turner, Mandy Harrison, and Bob from sales, we should use the people attending the next committee meeting will be John Wilson, Gloria Turner, Mandy Harrison, and Bob Turner. Instead of saying, I confirm my reservation of a single room on July 16 and a double room on October 17, we should say, I confirm my reservation of a single room on July 16 and a double room on October 17. Write, rewrite, and edit. Rewriting is a basic principle of the best business writers, and it's a habit we must get into if we are to learn how to improve our writing. Every professional writes and edits, and then possibly edits again. This is where the real power happens, when you cut, tighten, sharpen, refine, fix, and polish. Short words and short sentences. In the business correspondence, short words are best. The fewer syllables your words contain, the faster your readers are able to read your writing. Short sentences are best also in the correspondence. Research has been conducted into the degree of understanding of sentences of different lengths. They find if a sentence contains 7 to 10 words, then there will be 95% of people who will understand its message on the first reading. They also find if a sentence contains 15 to 20 words, then there will be 75% of people who will understand its message on the first reading. But if a sentence contain 27 words or more, then there will be only 4% of people who will understand its message on the first reading. Short paragraphs and short messages. In the business correspondence, short paragraphs are best. For better readability, a paragraph should be around 43 words, definitely not more than 65, as suggested by our author. Short messages are best in the correspondence too. Most readers are busy, impatient, and have short attention spans. We want to know the gist of the message quickly. We want to know the point quickly. We don't want to waste time trying to work out what the reader is trying to say and what the writer wants us to do. Usually, we expect the writer to do that. Conclusion. When you are writing, ask yourself whether you would say this if you were speaking to the recipient. Eliminate useless jargon by writing as you would speak. The key to good business writing is to write in a natural style as if you were having a conversation.